Hello, welcome to Keeping It Lit. My name's Tomas.
My name's Jacob.
And this week this time we have Natalie Doherty with us.
Hello.
Hello, Natalie. How are you?
Good. How are you?
Thank you for travelling so far to be here.
You're welcome. The Lewis is great fun coming in.
Yeah.
When did we first meet, Natalie?
Oh God, it would have been in the lead up to the preparations for Krakow.
Well done.
So thank you. Oh, this is a test.
This is a test.
Okay.
I'm keeping score. This is what this notebook is for.
Okay, perfect. So it would have started probably in the August-September 2015 when we started taking the preparations for Krakow on the road. So we started off with the Anchor programme in Arklow. And we were down for a weekend, and I think that's possibly when we first all crossed paths, or the Anchor, the Krakow preparation was
kind of in
was
that.
how we all started, how we all started off, and how we're all still talking to each other.
Amazingly, 4 years down the line.
4 years down the line, and how many countries and campsites and whatever, and yet we're still talking to one another.
Yeah,
So
amazingly.
we are doing
It's
doing well.
Clearly the work of the Spirit, like no other explanation. Oh dear. So give us a little bit about Anchor and what that is, what it means.
So Anchor is a programme that gets brought out every so often when it's needed in the Dublin Diocese. The whole point of it was to get young people and to have an intense kind of retreat weekend with them around topics of leadership and discipleship and friendship. Lots of ships in there, hence the title of Anchor, highly creative in that.
Join the Catholic Navy.
Pretty much, yeah. So it was, I loved it. Like, we had an element of pilgrimage in it. We had an element of who is Jesus. And my favourite bit on the Sunday morning, we would begin with a shared breakfast. So that example of table fellowship, of the Eucharist in our own kind of how we can share every day. And I love that because of all the stuff people would bring in, the excitement and I've no eggs, was a thing that I said regularly on the Sunday morning, going, bring something with you, Natalie. So it helped us when I say us, there was a team of 9 of that were kind of in charge of the pilgrimage to Krakow for World Youth Day, and there were over 300 young people with us. So Anchor was used to kind of create another layer of leadership for people. So because we had so many, for all of us trying to keep track of them in Krakow, so people were then grouped as per geographical location, and then leaders were appointed to manage that little smaller group of maybe 10, 15 max, and then we would check in with the leaders. So it was a whole layer of leadership, of care, of being able to pastorally mind people as we went along. So Anchor was the programme that we used to train those leaders of the smaller groups, and that's where we came across you pair.
Yes, somehow we kind of appeared from the woodwork.
You did.
We came out of the mist. Just,
In some respects, yeah. Well, it was more of a sea of people with Krakow.
Yeah.
Very much
So there's a thing that we've kind of, when we did our little introduction the whole time, we kind of struggle with what is World Youth Day?
Yeah.
So
we have this for us.
Yeah, because we have a combined one which involves like Glastonbury.
Yeah.
So
like religious Glastonbury.
Yeah.
Because I normally tend to say it's a pilgrimage, but a pilgrimage through Glastonbury Festival.
Yes, that would be, I don't know how else you could improve on that definition, but
Wow.
I suppose World Youth Day is some random place in the world that is picked by the Pope, and everyone and anyone who has the ability descends on it for a week. And there's an official opening ceremony, then there's chances for catechesis with a bishop, which generally we don't get in the church. We don't have this opportunity, and the best thing is you could get a bishop from anywhere in the world once they speak your language. So through that, I always find it interesting because you get an experience of faith from a different part of the world. And then there's the official welcome of the Pope, and so there's a big outdoor gathering for that. And then there are Stations of the Cross and kind of a theme of reconciliation, which is very big at World Youth Day, and mercy. And then again, like what we had in our anchor programme, that notion of pilgrimage, then there's pilgrimage built into World Youth Day, and the fact we're all on this faith journey because everyone walks some ridiculous walk out to a field that has been allocated in that designated random place throughout the world.
Somewhere near a motorway.
So, I mean, we were very lucky in Panama because our location of where we were staying in our host parish was superb on the metro line and all that. But Krakow, I mean, I still remember walking down like basically what would have been the equivalent of the M50, but they ran out of time or money or whatever. So then you had to like go down into a ditch, hop a fence, try and find another road. Like all fun, all parts of the crack, like all parts of the banter that is World Youth Day. It's hard to describe it because it sounds like, why in God's name would you go sleep in a field with 2 million other people, i.e. Krakow? But it's an experience, and I remember in Panama, someone that I brought from the parish in work. And like he'd been on Camino and he'd been engaging with his faith more and more, but just even the opening ceremony without any of the papal events or the excitement of the papal events, the opening ceremony was quite mind-blowing for him because it was the first time that he had been in such a large group of like-minded people. And I suppose that's the biggest thing of it. It's like-minded people, and we may not speak each other's language or have a clue what other people are saying or experiencing in their faith, but we're all united with the Eucharist. And whether you're aware of that when you're in at World Youth Day or not is another thing. But ultimately, I suppose that's a bit what it's about.
Yeah.
But it's an experience.
It's a great experience. It's a strange one. It kind of goes down in that, like, we have a weird list of like positive actions based on faith, and that's kind of near the top of our list. It's a little bit weird to kind of describe it, but it's really cool. You were saying you were at Krakow and in Panama.
So were you too?
Yes, all three of us.
And we're all still talking to one another.
Amazing.
I mean, you go through some of the most grueling things that we have been exposed to, I'd say, in our lives, and you are worn down in so many ways. And I don't think you come through those things without forming bonds with people.
So, we were all in Krakow and Panama together, and how did you find sort of being a leader at both of them, and kind of how they differ from each other? Because we all know that every World Youth Day is completely different, but if you've never gone to one, it's a bit hard to kind of comprehend what are we waffling on about. Krakow was very different because it was a constant case of monitoring and logistics, and our accommodation in Krakow was superb. We were literally right where the action was, apart from we had to travel a bit for catechesis, and then we had to travel a lot for the vigil. I suppose the problem was, or not so much the problem, there was, as I said, there was so many of us in Krakow. It meant that the team spent the entire day doing logistics, and the more people you have means the more problems you'll face of lost passports or where are the bags
and who has the tickets and I've lost this and whatever. So it was very much a logistical thing. I always had your logistical hat on and checking in with people and making sure so and so had a break that day. And so I don't know whether I fully immersed myself into Krakow, but I suppose the culture of Krakow as well,
like there was a great atmosphere, and I still have videos on my phone that I watch every so often of us all going down the streets, and all the different cultures coming together, and people just singing their head off. And I still have the video of we were late getting to catechesis, so I was part of the music team that went first, and we were running behind, and so we decided to do our warm-ups on the tram. And so we started singing Lord I Need You, and then pretty much 90% of the tram was singing with us, and that kind of, that spirit, that unitedness, like that was unreal for me to experience. And there was so much, I suppose, life in Krakow. But when I stopped and think about it, and I put it in the context of Panama, there was life to it because there were so many young people, but I suppose the church in Krakow was very straight-laced, where the atmosphere in Panama just blew my mind. Now, okay, we had less people. We went from like
Very
300
helpful.
or whatever to 30, which was very, very helpful.
We all fit in the same plane this time.
Yeah. Yeah, we could get everyone onto like one bus. Well, minus the bags, or the bags on the roof. Anyway, Panama. But so it meant you could engage more with people. It meant you weren't just covering logistics. You could actually like walk with people, journey with people, engage with people. Still got up to a bit of mischief. But the whole culture of Panama just blew my mind. And it just was head and shoulders above Krakow for me. It was really like the church was alive, and faith was alive, and you just couldn't help but be proud of your faith. Well, for me, I couldn't help but be proud of my faith. And I love Spain and kind of the Latino culture and food and everything. So the music was just like one massive like rave, but it was a church gathering and people walking down or dancing down the streets. And yeah, it was unreal. Like, I don't think I could ever reach anything as high in my life as that. I suppose Krakow, I didn't really have anything else to compare with. So, that was kind of the benchmark, but Panama went above and beyond it. But it was just a different type of life. There was life in Krakow, but there was a different type of life in Panama that I just resonated really deeply with.
Yeah. When you talk about the logistics there and how it was maybe more difficult to engage then, I'm just thinking we, at home, we have our photography club competition and the theme is religion, and Mum and I were clapping our hands together with glee and thinking this is going to be so awesome, and we've realized you cannot engage the same way if you are in the photographer's mindset, and we're going to these things and coming away with no photos, or we're going to it and feeling like we weren't there. It's just so hard. You really need to make the space for your spiritual life in these things, and that's why the leaders' jobs were so difficult over in Krakow. Just to hop back to a word we've used a few times, catechesis.
Catechesis.
It's a big word. It's a big Christianese word. So to those of you scratching your heads, maybe Natalie could tell us a little bit about that, and we'll get into why in a minute.
So I suppose the easiest way to explain catechesis is in the context of evangelization or evangelizing, which again is another big word that people go about.
I didn't bring my dictionary.
So the way I like to explain what the two of them mean is evangelizing is sharing the good news, is talking about faith with anyone who will listen, and catechesis is then teaching the faith, so predominantly the Catholic faith. So one is about sharing, and then one is about teaching to deepening your knowledge on it. And that's a very, very simple, basic answer that I try to give.
Yeah, and you are a catechist.
Yes! Yay, I know what my job title is.
Yeah, and you're a catechist in a parish.
Yep.
So how do you find being a catechist in a parish?
It's very interesting, and I suppose what makes it so interesting is the transition that our church is in Ireland. I mean, realistically, it's the wheels are moving very, very fast, and so
to be a catechist can be very difficult. If people have problems, they expect you to have all the answers, to tell them, to justify what you do and whatever. But it's also a great opportunity. I try as best as I can to predominantly work with adults and parents rather than children. When you think about teaching the faith, you automatically think about like communion time, reconciliation, confirmation, whatever it is. But the more I've been working in parish, the more you realise that you can do whatever amount of work you want with children. So say children, preparing them for First Holy Communion. And that's great, and they have a great day out of it. But it's nothing if the support isn't there at home. It's the same with anything. Like if your parents don't support you being on the football team, they're not going to take you to practice. You won't be there for training. You won't get picked for the matches and whatever. And then your interest then dwindles. And it's the same with faith. So I try to spend the majority of my time working kind of a two-pronged approach. One is with parents who are presenting themselves and their children for preparation for sacraments of initiation, and then the others are the parishioners who are sitting there in front of us, or the people who are who may have an interest in faith. Because when you think about it, in Ireland we've kind of neglected faith formation in any way, shape or form. And I've learned this a lot with my own mother. We'd be coming home we would generally go to the vigil mass at home, and we'd be walking home and say she might have spotted something that she's seen her entire life and knows exactly when it happens but doesn't know the why. And there's so many things that we have never ever addressed the why in our church, and so catechists have an opportunity to address that why for everyone. And maybe you already do know, but you need the reminder of the why. So using liturgical seasons, why do we use the colour purple? What does it mean during Advent? And then what does it mean during Lent? Because they're two very different seasons. Why do we have the 5 studs in the candle, the Paschal candle at Easter? Why is there incense in the studs? What does that mean? And as I said, you may know it already, but maybe you don't. And having that gentle reminder, and it's not to come down with major, heavy theological topics, but just basic conversations of why we do what we do, and what does it involve.
I think there's a real, a huge group of people who know the form without the substance.
Yeah.
And there's a friend of mine, and her mother was really surprised when her daughter told her that, you can use prayers other than just the ones that you read, and the Hail Mary and the Our Father. You can pray with your own words. And her mother, but I haven't, been taught to do that, or I haven't been, I've never done that. I've never seen that done. So it's a huge need. I really saw it in my own parish recently when we had our parish assembly, and that was the huge cry from the people, was faith formation.
Yeah. And that's kind of why at World Youth Day, so there's always a theme to a World Youth Day, and recently in Panama it was Behold the Handmaid of the Lord. It was very centred on Mary and Mary's yes, and we had our Dare to Say Yes t-shirts.
Yes, we did.
Yes, we did. So that overall theme of World Youth Day then reflects of the 3 days of catechesis. And one of the most popular things is that catechesis, because you actually get to sit down with a bishop who seems so far removed otherwise, and talk about things, but more importantly ask questions. The question times are always the biggest response to things, and the things that people need the most, because you never ever get a chance to ask the questions or even have a faith conversation. And it's great if you're a young person, you get to go to World Youth Day because you experience this, but what happens otherwise?
Yeah.
And we are severely missing that in our church life.
And I think we're really aware of how privileged we've been.
Yeah, no, we kind of feel very lucky that we've had the opportunity to go to 2 World Youth Days now, and we're kind of now since we've gone to them, what can we do with what we've learned? And this is kind of where this little podcast comes from.
Yeah.
So another thing is sort of, what is your experience of coming back to a parish after World Youth Day?
What has been my experience?
After you've slept it off, because that's
so that's
very
step
important.
one, like recovery.
Yeah.
Well, I suppose because I work in a parish, I get the opportunity to give the after gospel reflection. So I get to share the experiences and hopefully start a conversation and start a movement. Now that can be quite difficult because depending on the makeup of your parish, and do you have people to work with? I suppose sometimes for me it can be difficult because people see, well, I'm the employed person in there, so I should have all the skills, and why do I need them along the way? So I'm trying to, I suppose, equip people. I'm not going to be there forever. I'll be moving on to wherever, is next for me in life. And so they need to be able to, I suppose, swim without the armbands. So going to World Youth Days and being able to share the experience, can start a conversation like that. As I said, we're severely missing the opportunity for faith conversations in our parishes and anywhere. I mean, faith is such a private, closed, behind the door type of thing. And I don't know whether that's a confidence thing or whatever it is. But recently, actually, sorry, I know this is a tangent, but recently
This podcast supports tangents.
Yay. Sponsored by Tangent. But recently we were talking about how, when I say we, I mean in work, we were talking about people saying, okay, well, faith is a very private thing. But then it's a case of, well, okay, are you talking about faith? Because I'm talking about Catholic faith. And Catholic faith is a very public thing, is a very communion orientated thing. So trying to break that in people's minds is quite difficult. We're still in the provided for church where the priest comes in and does everything, and parishioners were always taught to be passive. And so we're trying to break that culture, and the more you get up and talk and say, well, okay, we need to do this together, we're in this together, and constantly say it over and over and over again, that it might begin to help people kind of say, well, actually, I was baptised and that gives me every right to have my say, to do my part, and to lead this forward.
Like, people forget all the time that, we are the church. And we are the body of Christ. And when people say they have their private faith, it's like, well, you don't get a part of a body just going, nah, I'm freezing up and doing my own thing. You all go on ahead. That's not a that's not a good way to have a human body working. So, we're the body of Christ, and that means everybody. Yeah.
But I do think it goes back to the concept of, well, what is faith and how do you define faith? And faith is a very umbrella term. But I suppose from our perspective, we're looking at Catholic faith, and there are a lot of marks of what a Catholic faith is in comparison to, say, faith. And I think in our culture today, a lot of people have slipped into the faith, or slipped into having faith, but not really understanding Catholic faith, and they engage with Catholic faith with the eyes of just faith, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and it's kind of it leads to a shallow reading of it then for that person, and then we wonder why people are slipping away. But if they're only bouncing off the surface like that, it's And I think, one of the key things that Pope Francis said in his vigil address that I'm consistently coming back to, because he references it in his latest letter or exhortation, Christus Vivit, is this notion about roots. And I suppose today we live in a world that doesn't really provide roots. This notion of providing roots, of grounding people in life today, and we don't have that. And faith is a good grounding.
And I'm very privileged that my parents chose this for me and helped me along the way. But so many people don't have that, or have a surface kind of faith that doesn't have any meaning to it. And so when people are hit with trials, with troubles, they don't have that basis to go by. And yeah, like life today is so instant. Nearly every one of us is going around with a smartphone in our pocket, and it's all about selfie, selfie this and selfie that, and who can get the most likes. But when trials hit, where do you go to then? And that's not to say that, well, faith is just a comfort blanket. In no means am I saying that, but just that grounding of, well, what support do I have? What strength do I have to get me through the good times as well as the bad times? And more importantly, the everydays that are, just okay. And faith is a huge, Catholic faith is a huge thing for that. And I think a lot of young people nowadays are missing it. My niece is 3 3/4, as she clearly informed me the other day. I'm not allowed to say a half, it has to be 3/4. I worry about the world she's going to grow up in. I'm so glad I got through my college years before social media really became, major. And I worry about her and what she'll have to face, and every inch of your life can be photographed or videoed and can be used to tear you down. And what support, what grounding can our family provide for her? And I'm not saying that I'm great thinking about it, but I'm thinking of her in that way. But I'd say there's a lot of people out there who don't have anyone there to think of that for them, and or even themselves. And what do you do then? And yeah.
Okay. To depart on a tangent, I'm going to take a back seat because Christus Vivit was mentioned.
Yes.
And two people that you have the privilege of listening to today were recently in a wonderful position to discuss Christus Vivit, and I will let them discuss that now.
Yeah, so what Jacob is alluding to is that myself and Natalie were very luckily asked to go over to a conference, a forum that was run by the Dicastery for Laity, Family and Life, and it was all about Christus Vivit, and we got to go over and we had a great time. It was kind of intense, to say the least. You'd be surprised how sitting in a room for 12 hours a day with simultaneous translation gets to you.
Yeah.
But it was an amazing opportunity to meet people from places I've never even heard of before. It was crazy.
Yeah. It's and it only happened a couple of weeks ago, and I still feel as if I'm unpacking it and processing it. And actually today was on my mind a lot. I was flicking through a notebook that had all my pages and pages and pages of notes. But as you said, we were very lucky. We were over representing the Irish Bishops' Conference, and we were 2 amongst 250 odd young people who were very similar to us from all over the world.
Yes.
So we got to meet people who were facing the same struggles as us, had great ideas, had lots of questions. And again, it was like another form of World Youth Day of finding peer support.
Yes, it was a great opportunity for that. It was great to have the chance to meet people all over the world, to kind of actually just bounce ideas off them as well.
Yeah.
And just to kind of hear where they're coming from, because we're a lot of the time we're talking about the Irish context, but it's kind of I'd never known about the Papua New Guinean context or the Ugandan context or other different countries
And the funny thing is, being these remote countries of the Solomon Islands, and yet they have the exact same experience and problems and difficulties as us. And I don't mean this to come across wrong, but that was quite heartening.
It was nice to not feel as if it's only our problem.
Yeah,
that was pretty good.
I remember the first day. So for 3 days we had various assemblies and panels and talks and whatever, but we had a 2-hour working group, and we were all split up as per our designated language, and we were in our working groups. And I remember people being kind of anxious about answering the question, because the first day it was, well, what impact had the Synod on the youth from October 2018 and Christus Vivit have on, you know, in your church context? And people were really anxious because, like, there was very little.
Yeah, it was a lot of, that first day really was like, oh, there was a thing. Oh, great. Oh, we found out about this. Okay, this is nice.
Yeah, so the 3 days was like the Synod and pre-Christus Vivit, then the second day was Christus Vivit itself, and then the third day was, oh, how do we move forward with this? But so many people were like, there was a pre-Synod, there was a Synod, there was what? Like, a lot of people didn't have Christus Vivit in their own native language. And
that was an issue that came up a few times, because we met a couple of people from Japan. And I was asking them about, oh, did you hear about the online survey that was done? And they were like, no, because it's not available in Japanese. And you're just like, wait a minute. How many other people can't get this document because it's not in their language?
Yeah, but one of the things that was totally brought up in my working group was the fact of 2 women were working with people who were illiterate. You know, and the majority, she would say, like, the majority of our country is illiterate. And yet I'm supposed to present them with a papal document and go, read that, understand that, engage with that. Why aren't you engaging with it?
Please read these 299 paragraphs. Go ahead.
So it was interesting from that perspective. And even just thinking, well, how can we break the mold of how do we present a papal document? I mean, that seemed to be the most groundbreaking thing ever. Like, instead of a PDF online or an actual physical copy that you hold in your hand, how else can we distribute this? Do we have anything? Oh, wait, we have like all this technology, all these resources, and yet we're still behind on using them and how to distribute. I suppose everyone who was there obviously is involved in church in some way, shape or form, so they'd be kind of up on it. But generally when we were talking about, as I said, you know, from, well, how has your church at local level responded? You know, once one person said, well, actually it hasn't, you know, the bishops haven't engaged, or we haven't heard about it, or whatever, and then everyone was like, oh, me too.
I had the same experience.
That was a huge thing.
Our discussion group, one guy, he's a business teacher in Manila, and he was just like, essentially, this is a marketing problem. Which was just like, oh my God, I never thought of this way before. And that was sort of really good to kind of open up our discussion even more about, like, how do we get around this?
Yeah, because that was one of the biggest things on the third day when it was saying, well, where to from here? You know, what do you do with Christus Vivit? Well, actually, we need to go back steps because we need to get it out there. And maybe that's what our biggest thing is from here on, is how do we get it out there? How do we get people to engage with it? How can it actually be in a way that's tangible, that's shareable? You know, bite-sized chunks and whatever it is, and to get it out there. And I mean, if you hand a young person a 299 paragraph document and go, hey, would you like to engage with this and have a discussion with me? Come on, let's be realistic here.
There's a lot of, like, so the pair of us have read it, it was kind of like, you must read this before you go, in the email that we were sent.
Me too, by the way, just in case anyone was wondering.
Jacob
he's still in the room.
For those keeping score at home.
But it was like, you're trying to read, so we were like semi-panicky reading it. I was anyway. And you're just kind of going, okay, this is great. But there's a lot of, like, sort of high, I'm going to say, like, meta language and stuff kind of going on, because it's all about, like, okay, how can you grasp this concept to make it useful? Like, there's really useful bits in it, but you kind of read it and you're like, wait, where am I? At times.
But in fairness, like, it has been one of the better papal documents, and it, you know, the language of it is so good, and I loved the constant referencing to other things that Pope Francis has said, particularly, as I mentioned earlier, his vigil speech about roots and everything like that, and chapter 6 is dedicated to that. But it's still a papal document. So that can be difficult to engage with, I suppose. But it was interesting, like, even from the perspective of the staff that were there from the Dicastery for the Laity, Family and Life, they were, you know, under the assumption that everyone had it inside out and loved it, and even they were under the assumption that the world has read it and the world has engaged with it. And I don't think they fully grasped that actually it's a minority.
Yeah, I think so after each of our discussion groups each day, there was like an assembly where a member of each group kind of talked about it. And there's this guy called Vinny, who was from the North Maritime Islands. He's hilarious. But he gave us this example, and it was like, how many people here have been on the Vatican website?
Yes.
And there's a little exercise that I ended up sort of thinking of. So if you're ever at home, I'm going to give you 3 websites, and I want you to look at them in this order. So the first one is Vatican News. Okay, so check out Vatican News, see how it's laid out, right? The next one is the Dicastery for Laity, Family and Life. Have a look at that one, then you have a better idea. And then finally, look at the Vatican website.
Vatican.va.
Yes, and just see what happens.
Enjoy skidding downhill.
Enjoy the journey.
Oh no, don't ruin it.
Enjoy the journey of what you will now learn.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. But it was kind of, we had a few opportunities to kind of talk to the sort of people that work in the dicastery, and that was kind of nice. But really, it was that chance to talk to other people around the world that are sort of involved with stuff was really cool, and to actually talk to a few of the synod auditors was actually pretty sweet as well.
Yeah, I had a synod auditor in my group, Brianna from the USA, and I got to ask her lots of questions. But even the fact of what she was able to share with us, that was so groundbreaking. The fact that there were young auditors there
that participated.
And they got speaking rights and they got this, that and the other, but yet none of it was in mainstream media or public knowledge.
Yes.
Because just as I hear you speaking about the problems facing disseminating Christus Vivit, I'm remembering 2015, I'm remembering Laudato Si.
Yeah.
And then we had secular media picking it up. We had people going, hey, look, Pope Francis has just written this really cool document about the environment.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And the majority of people I speak to in the church don't know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
You know? And since then we've had, what have we had? We've had Evangelii Gaudium, we've had
Amoris Laetitia.
We've had Gaudete et Exultate.
Yes.
You know, we've had a lot of...
And Christus Vivit.
Christus Vivit. You know, we've had a lot of really, really great documents from the Pope.
Mm-hmm.
And if you find them, delve into them, grapple with the language and the format and, you know, get to grips with them. They're fantastic. But finding them is like the first nigh insurmountable step.
Veritas.
Veritas
is a good place.
And them all published. Yeah.
And they're a $5 and it's fantastic.
Or if you want to, you can find a PDF somewhere on the internet of it that will bring you somewhere, and you will be able to get them.
There is probably a bad link on the Vatican website. Don't at me, at Pontifex.
Generally, if you Google the Latin title of it, the first link that comes up on your search is the link to the Vatican website, and then in the corner is the download as PDF or open as PDF.
Even as we're talking, and you're talking about people not knowing about this whole synodal process, or synodic, synodal.
Synodality.
Synthetic.
Keep going.
Give us a 60-second rundown of what has happened.
At some point, the Pope said, we need to have a gathering to discuss young people. And so they started the process of, well, okay, we can't just go in cold, we need to have some form of backup or some form of base document. So they started, as Tomas said, this online survey. They had a gathering of young people from all over the world for a pre-synod gathering. And then that led on to the working document then to start off for the synod.
Yep.
So the synod went on for an entire month. In October last year, and then they came out with the document from everything that they had discussed.
Yep.
They voted on it. You can see all the votes online, and I think it's something laborious or whatever the document is called. Again, it's a Latin title, but
Final document.
Instrumentum Laborious. There we go.
There
Thank
you go.
Sorry, I knew I'd get there. And then from that, so. The synod then was, a lot of it is kind of direct quotes from young people sharing their experiences. That then shaped what Pope Francis said at his gatherings in Panama. And then a lot of the synod quotes and bits and pieces are there like directly copied and pasted into Christus Vivit because the Pope felt so highly about certain stories of that young people had shared, and then it all got put together in Christus Vivit. Again, multiple steps on the journey, but it's still we're still at step stage.
And then we had the forum, and that very much felt like the baby steps of we are doing something, and this is the start of us doing stuff.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
We also met Papa Francesco.
Yes. Yes. Not that I forgot about that, but so we had the forum for the 3 days, very intense days of that, and then we were taken like VIPs into St. Peter's Basilica.
Yes.
Cardinal Farrell celebrated Mass.
Yep, in English. Which was great.
Yes, but we were then taken around to the Clementine Hall in the Apostolic Palace and brought up all these steps that originally I learnt because the spacing of them I thought was quite weird, but that was to accommodate in the past horses used to go up the stairs. Fun fact.
As one would,
As one would, because people were too noble to walk, so the horses, so that is designated why it's at a particular steeping and space.
Yeah, okay.
Anyway, side note, #tangent. And then we were brought into the hall, and there were a few funny moments of random people walking through, not realising we were there.
They didn't know we were there, we didn't know they were there.
Yeah. And then they closed the doors and it was like, ooh. And then the doors opened and in walked the Pope, and there were 1 or 2 speeches from Cardinal Farrell, from Pope Francis himself. And then we had composed kind of like a little press release of kind of what we wanted to say about the forum. It was done simultaneously in the 4 languages, and I think I aged about 20 years of my life trying to go through that process.
Yeah, working in 4 languages is hard.
Yeah. And then, one of the Spanish-speaking girls read that out, and then he met us all individually, which was very, very surreal.
Yeah.
And I have the picture hanging on the wall in my office now, but it still feels very, very surreal. It took a while to kind of process from that, and I'm glad we didn't come straight home.
No.
Initially, our flight was supposed to fly us home on the Saturday evening, but we didn't fly home till the Sunday, and I liked it because it kind of gave us time to just like
get our heads back.
Yeah, and like lift the pressure together, because I think we would have gone home
separately. And
and then trying to get the pair of us together to try and sit down and go, well, what did you think of what happened? And even though we may not have spoken that much about it, but just if something did ding in our head, to be able to share and say something.
And that was really cool, because throughout these 3 days we're sort of sitting in a room for like an hour and a half, and then it's like you have half an hour of a break.
Yeah.
And that was great, just to have each other air, which was nice. But it was great to have each other just kind of be like, what did you think of that?
Yeah.
And to kind of just figure it out. So it's kind of like we had something going ahead, because there was a few people that were kind of on their own at it, and it was kind of difficult to know how they were sort of processing it.
Yeah. So each Episcopal conference could kind of send 2 people or so. Or I think depending on size, like America could send 5 or whatever. But there were also organizations, so religious movements and stuff. So that's how it built up to the 250 odd. So some people just had 1 to send or whatever. So it was good to connect with the various different movements, not only Episcopal conferences, but
no, that was really cool.
Movements
to be like,
from around the world.
That was cool to get their involvement.
Yeah. I mean, when else are we going to actually have this engagement? As you said, like you get to meet people from countries you've never even heard of, or you would never even dream of getting there. Yeah. So it was very, 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 very interesting from that perspective. But again, so intense, so deep that like you're still trying to process it. Yeah. And I think it will take a while. And as I said today, I was thinking about it, and I've thoughts in my head, and it's like, ooh, how can we move forward with this? Is this realistic? Or a question that we like to ask in work a lot is, where to from here? But I'll let you know. Stay tuned, listeners. Stay tuned.
There's this thing called the Foundational Leadership Program. It's run by the Office of Evangelization here in Dublin. Myself and Jacob have done it. I went back as a moderator, but Natalie here is one of the gurus. I believe. I could be wrong.
Sure,
Yeah.
yeah. I'll take that title of guru. So way back when, the very, 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 very first year that Foundation Leadership Programme was done, I was a participant on it.
Ah,
Yes. So back then it was an ecumenical project. So we were between here and Christchurch Cathedral, and it was a very interesting mix. Mostly kind of the same topics as what's covered now. Different speakers, different opportunities, but again, the conversations with your peers, because we're coming from different faith backgrounds, it was quite interesting. And then from that, then I got that tap on the shoulder that you both know so well.
yes.
The Honourable Gerard Gallagher.
And from that, that's kind of how things escalated, to put it politely.
That's a good way to put
Raging
it.
inferno we're at today.
Yeah, and then so I think the first thing that I got heavily involved in was Anchor, and then we went to Krakow, and then we revived Foundation Leadership Programme. Again, it wasn't in its original format, but I mean, a lot of it is different themes for each month, and guest speakers come in, and our job is to just kind of coordinate it, or be the bread of the gluten-free sandwich, and just kind of set up the morning and do continuation of things, and just again journey with people. We always use the Road to Emmaus Gospel, and curiously, that was the gospel passage that was strongly used through the synod process and through Christus Vivit too. And so that's really, it's a really, really important one, that notion of journeying with people rather than dragging them along or kicking them from behind, but walking side by side. And I suppose that's what we try to do with Foundation Leadership Programme, and then enable people to find their strength, their confidence, to then go on and to journey with other people.
Yeah, I've always kind of seen it as a great chance to kind of see people's development over like a long period of time.
Yeah, like that's one of my favourite things about it. Like when you meet people for the first time in October, when they come in and they're like, what have I signed up to? Who are these people? And then when you get to the likes of graduation, or actually most particularly the social immersion weekend theme, especially when people go out and do the soup run, and that connection that people have, and the experience that people have from that, and to see where they were from the start to where they were when it gets to graduation time, and seeing that journey is amazing. It gives me great strength, it gives me great hope, but also, I mean, in parish, sometimes you may not get to spend a lot of time with your own peers, because they may not be there. But for the likes of FLP, you're with your peers, and so even though I'm there as a guru or whatever title you want to give me, I learn so much from the journey, and from being with people, and that's what I love so much about it, that I get to learn, that I get to experience, even if it's just sitting in the background and ringing the bell when the time is up, but listening to people and seeing how they grow is amazing for me.
Bringing it down to the level that most of us are at parish level, what steps can we take? What positive steps can we take?
Well, first of all, I disagree with you bringing it down to the level.
Okay. Coming down a notch from the intensity of World Youth Day, maybe. Yeah.
I suppose, figuring out, where are you sitting with your faith is a huge thing. And that struggle, as I said, with faith in society today is a very, very difficult thing. Belonging is a huge issue, and sometimes you can't do something because you need to answer those questions. You need to get grounding for yourself. Again, going back to what Pope Francis says in Christus Vivit.
Find your roots. Find your roots.
Exactly. So, where are you sitting with the reality, and finding out, what gives you nourishment? What gives you strength? because you have to be grounded in that in order to be able to go into parish, because you face difficulties. Being a young person in a parish, it isn't all sunshine and unicorns and rainbows. You know, you get in trouble because this is what we've always done, and you know, where do you fit in? But I think an important thing is to have conversations. I said earlier on, we don't have an opportunity for faith conversations, but generally we don't have an opportunity for conversations with, you know, our clergy or with whoever it is. And I think, you know, first step is to sit down with whoever your honcho is in charge, and to have a conversation and say, I'm interested in faith. This is what I find interesting, as in it could be Laudato Si, it could be some form of social justice, it could be Taizé prayer, it could be, oh, God knows, whatever it could be, like liturgy, sacramental preparation, music. And so once you have a grounding in yourself, and then go chat to the priest or whoever it is in charge and say, this is what I really get life from, this is what inspires my faith, and I'd love to share that. How can we work together for that? Is it something you would, you know, that you would be willing to work with me on, or whatever it is? But I suppose it's drawn on your own skills, your own interests, because instead of rocking up to a parish, I mean, I know from experience, you're the young person that puts your head above the water, and you get everything and anything thrown at you. And I had so many things thrown at me that I actually was more draining for me than was life-giving. So if I would do it all again, I would go back and say, this is what interests me. Well, first of all, I'd have to figure out what interested me, and then say, well, this is what interests me, and how can I use my talents, my skills? Because we all have talents and skills. It doesn't matter whether you think you don't, you do. We all have a voice. We all have a role to contribute. As I said, we're all baptized, and through that, you know, we all have a place at the table. We all have a vote, and how can you use what's interesting for you? And you know what, sometimes it may not work, but you've put your hand up, and maybe you might then get connected with, say, something in a neighbouring parish, or you might get to work. I think we need to maybe stop as well thinking of our own little parish unit, and begin thinking more of working with people in an area or a deanery, or instead of having so much pressure of one or two people in one parish, but collaboratively working together. I mean, we're all heading towards the same goal, and I think we need to be working more and more like that. As I said, being a young person in the church, it can be a very isolating experience, so we need to start knocking on our neighbour's door. You know, our gospel at the weekend was, who is my neighbour? Well, go out and find your neighbour.
Sweet.
Beautiful.
Yes, so thank you so much. Thank you, Natalie.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for being here. That was very nice to have you on. That was pretty sweet.
And we would love to hear from you. You can contact us at keepingitlitpod@gmail.com. You can find us on social media, on Twitter, Instagram and Facebook at keepingitlitpod. So please shoot us a message if you're enjoying it. If you know someone who's doing some great things who you think should talk to us, please shoot us a message. We'd love to talk to other people.
Yeah, no, we really want to make it into like a bit of a community, so that we can everyone can kind of learn from each other and end up hopefully in the same place. Thank you so much for listening. Hopefully you listen to us, we listen to you. My name's Tomas.
My name's Jacob.
I was Natalie.
And remember, keep it lit.